my name is Goran Nikolic. I work for Rabobank Group, and we are one of the largest global food and agribusiness lenders. And as you can see by this map, pretty much active globally. All right, let's get into the topic. So I thought I'd start first with the big three markets, and they could not have been more different. So let's start with the United States. So this was the best market in 2020, and really shrimp was the winner at retail. Of course, very low price points. This is the Urner Index, and you can see the price point is really record low, and even starting this year, quite low. But having said that, the United States really picked up shrimp consumption in 2020. And not only in volume, because of course you expect some volume increase due to the low price, but also in total value, there was growth in 2020. So the key question here is, will that greatly expanded retail consumption of shrimp, will that be sticky in 2021 as food service opens up? Something for the panelists to perhaps get deeper into. But no doubt that this will remain the market to be in 2021. Europe. Well, it was a bit of an uneventful, let's say, import-export dynamic. We were down pretty much in volume and also down in value, which you would expect a little bit in the pandemic, right? Shrimp really being affected by the lockdowns and lack of food service sales, and the Europeans did not pick up the same kind of retail consumption of shrimp as we saw in the United States. Now, going into China, and for years, China was the driver of shrimp demand. It was this booming shrimp market, but it was also the most disappointing market of 2020. If you look at this figure in the beginning of 2020, these are overstated. The growth wasn't as much as it looks here, and that's because 2019 is understated. There's still some great trade that is not yet captured by this data. However, the great trade has a very minor role in the second half of the year, and there you see a very big decline, a very significant decline of imports. And it's picking up now. It's getting better, but it's still quite a lot less. And that has to do with China testing everything, every food item that's imported for COVID. And there's also a real fear among the consumers, afraid to get COVID from shrimp or food packaging even, which is not a rational fear. But the key thing to observe in 2021 will be how quickly will this fear disappear as people get vaccinated. I mean, we're hopeful, but it will still take at least probably the first half of the year. But, let's see how it goes. So that's the picture of the market. And now let's quickly run through the main suppliers. I've picked out 4. Let's start with Ecuador. They all have their own story. So we'll hear more about Ecuador later, so I'll be brief. I mean, Ecuador is really on a phenomenal growth path. Look at this, basically almost double-digit growth of exports every year. And the only thing that COVID did is really slow down the growth somewhat. We're still positive, 8% year-to-date November, but mind you, this is volume-based exports. So probably production due to the extra processing, I would say probably double-digit growth this year in production, maybe 10, 11%, or maybe the following speakers can shed more light exactly how much that was. And, we really have to give credit to the Ecuadorian industry, how quickly they pivoted when the Chinese imports dropped due to that aforementioned testing. The industry quickly pivoted to Europe and the US, focusing on processing and building that capacity. It didn't take long to switch towards these 2 markets. And as you can see here, China is also coming back now. So very nimble industry, but I have to say there was also a painful moment here, and certainly a lesson was learned, whether And the lesson is that maybe relying on China for too long, that much is a risk factor. But let's look at the prices, and I think they shed a light to something very interesting. The farm gate prices for Ecuadorian shrimp crashed more than any other. And look, even now, in the first few weeks of 2021, they're still quite a lot lower, almost 25% lower than they were, back in 2020. But if you see the export value, it only is actually it's up by 1%. So something is strange, and the reason, well, it's not strange. What it really happened is that there was a profit pool shift from the smaller farmers towards those that have processing and export capability. So it's interesting, maybe later, to discuss what kind of lasting effect this has on the Ecuadorian industry and the structure. Will there be a shift of land from the smaller farmers to the bigger ones, and how will that look like? I think it's a very important structural change that this could create in the country. Going to India, India was actually the most hit country from a supply side. If you remember, there was lockdowns in only 4 or 5 days in advance. And one of the things that actually created is a big supply drop. But it's more than that. India already had stagnating value of export. In fact, since 2017, they haven't grown in value of exports. And 2020 just pushed that number even lower due to a drop in value. And you can see here the real problems were in March and April, but then also in June and July, there were real issues with exporting enough product out of India. For our estimates, India is probably down somewhere 12 to 15% in volume in 2020. I know some people in the market are saying bigger numbers. I can't justify that just yet from the volume of exports. But if there's some inventory, I didn't take that into account. In prices and what's happening now, so the prices in India are actually quite good in the beginning of the year. So that means so probably seeding will be quite good. And also you see the real problem, what really the most challenging part for India was in the middle part of the year. Somewhere between, well, actually already from January to May, June, July. But after that, it's starting to normalize. The first bar here is November. This also is November. So we're still below last year, November. But what I understand is that supply side is normalizing somewhat in India. But again, it's important to watch how much can they rebound in 2021. Moving along then to Vietnam. And again, a completely different story here. Vietnam is a country that was also on a good bull run, not as long as the one from Ecuador, but a couple of strong years of increasing sales and again exports, and then again those are interrupted by COVID. Basically, you saw a small decline. At least our data shows a small decline in export volumes and value. This is, by the way, year-to-date October, and I know some local sources from VASIP even would suggest that there could have been a full year growth, so or maybe just flat. So Vietnam certainly not as impacted as India, and also we'll see later in prices not as impacted as Ecuador. So sort of a middle ground, a country when it comes to impact. And here's again the price levels. The really two major drops in price in the beginning of the year and also in the second lockdown. But Vietnam has one interesting feature that neither India nor Ecuador nor Indonesia have, is that they are very diverse from a market perspective. They have almost equal sales between EU, US, Japan, South Korea, and they even export to a other group of nations. So they have very good market access and balance between these different export destinations, which, when demand is volatile, that's really an advantage, and certainly it will be an advantage in 2021, especially when EU They have a good trade relationship with the EU, so that could also be a benefit. And they're starting the year with a good price level, one of the highest price points from the major exporters, although as you see here correcting somewhat, but still very good price points. So this will promote growth and optimism in Vietnam. And lastly, from my list of major exporters, we have Indonesia. Now, unlike some of the other producers, Indonesia was not on a strong run previously. This is the year-to-date exports in tons, and they were kind of flat. There is a little bit of a growth, certainly some growth in value. And then you see this big uptick in 2020. And really, if you analyze the data, Indonesia was the main winner of 2020. And it all has to do with their very strong processing industry, but also the problems of Indonesia. If you look at it, every single month, Indonesia exported more volume and at a higher price level. Our data, and this is a reverse export, so we add up all the imports of the major trading partners. We have that Indonesia has had 20% volume and value growth. I think that's a bit too high of a number because there were some smaller countries that were not included in this, and they had less exports. And also the production for the local market has declined, which is significant in Indonesia. So it was probably less than that, maybe 10 or 15% growth. But I know some people out there talk about a decline in Indonesia. I really don't see that in the data. This really was a very strong year for Indonesia. And you also see the government talking about growth and bullish statements. And here's the big plus and the big negative for Indonesia. They rely very heavily on the U.S. And last year, U.S. was the main market to be, and they even, they specialize in retail products with a strong processing sector. So it was great to be in the U.S. And look, their price point is pretty much above 2019 in 2020, almost the whole year, except this one drop. But what will happen in 2021? You have Indonesia, you have India probably coming back, you have a strong Ecuador trying to diversify from China, you have the US, which maybe will be opening up towards food service. So there's all things that add up that I think will make difficult for Indonesia to realize the growth plans and momentum that they have due to this great year. So if I put it all together, on the demand side, we got to watch China. If China comes back in a big way, this will be a great year. The other one, we have to look at vaccination and opening up of food service, especially in the U.S. Will that consumption at retail be sticky? When the restaurants open up, will people still buy a lot of shrimp at retail? I think probably some of it will be sticky. And we will have a growing consumption. On the supply side, the good thing is we don't have any major diseases at the moment like we did, let's say, 7 to 10 years ago. So demand is not, so supply is very elastic and will likely respond to a growth in demand. So if I would conclude, I still think that it's going to be a year that will be very competitive, with so many countries either trying to continue the growth or make up for lost ground. So it will be still a buyer's market, and it will be, and this I've said on conferences before, probably there's never been a better year to start communicating towards the market, to educate the consumer, to create more innovative products, to drive demand. Especially when we need convenience now, and we're trying to keep that retail customer that we got during COVID. So those are my key points. I hope it leads you to a nice discussion for the rest of the seminar. Thank you, guys.